Over the course of this offseason, I've always been saying that the Carolina Panthers are a solid starting quarterback away from being a playoff team. You look at this roster, it's pretty solid on both sides of the football. You look at the offensive line, pretty good. Maybe the best offensive line that Carolina has had in over the last couple of seasons. You have Ikem Ekwonu, Taylor Morton manning your two offensive tackle spots. Then you have Bradley Bozeman at center, probably coming off the best season of his career up to this point. Austin Corbett, who you signed in free agency from the Los Angeles Rams. So your offensive line is pretty good. At wide receiver, it may not be a group that's going to blow you away, but you do have DJ Moore, the most underappreciated wide receiver in the game right now. He's super consistent. You have Robbie Anderson, who is a really good deep threat when he is able to catch the football. You also have Terrence Marshall, Rashard Higgins. So the wide receiving core outside of DJ Moore is not going to knock your rocks off, but it's good enough to get the job done. Then we already know about CMC. As long as he can stay healthy, if you're a Panthers fan, hopefully he can at least play for 10 games. I think that's going to be good enough to make your offense pretty effective if you keep him healthy for at least 75 to 80% of the season. And even if he does go down, you have Chuba Hubbard in the backfield. So for Carolina, you have your quarterback now and Baker Mayfield. And I know a lot of people are really skeptical about Baker Mayfield. But what I found funny is that, a year ago, when we were going into the 2022 NFL, the 2021 NFL season, a lot of people were praising Baker Mayfield. Didn't hear nobody call him out about his leadership. Nobody had any problems with his character up to that point. And then he gets injured, the Browns start losing, and then all of a sudden, Baker Mayfield's a terrible leader. Baker Mayfield's immature. The Cleveland Browns need an adult. I've never seen the narrative for a quarterback flip this fast outside of Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, Baker Mayfield was being heralded as the hero in Cleveland after their 2021 season. It sounded as if they were going to build a statue of Baker Mayfield after him leading the Browns to the playoffs that year. But then he has an injury-riddled season, which I kind of feel was a little bit mismanaged by Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns coaching staff. Baker Mayfield isn't even close to 80%, so why would you continue to put him in situations to further injure him and to further put your team back in the hole? I don't think that a less than 8% Baker Mayfield gives you a better chance to win than 100% Case Keenum. So Baker Mayfield finally gets traded out of Cleveland, which was a toxic situation. Let's just call it what it is. It was a toxic relationship. The fan base changed on Baker Mayfield. The coaching staff flipped on Baker Mayfield. And the locker room pretty much flipped on Baker Mayfield. So for him going to Carolina, not only is he going to be able to revitalize his career, but I think he's going to bring some much needed energy into that Carolina locker room. Because the morale for Panthers fans right now, even with the acquisition of Baker Mayfield, is still pretty low. There are a lot of people who don't believe that Baker Mayfield is going to work and that he's going to stick in Carolina. But you have Ben McAdoo as your offensive coordinator. Now, I'm not really a big fan of Ben McAdoo. And that doesn't mean that I don't think he's bad or good. I just think that, his work hasn't really been all that impressive. However, this is somebody that knows how to build an offense around his quarterbacks and is able to get his quarterbacks playing at a somewhat efficient level. And I think for Baker Mayfield, as long as he's able to stay 100% and you give him the keys to the car, he can drive you to wherever you need to go. Now, can Carolina get further than the wild card round with Baker Mayfield? I think that's to remain decided. But this is a quarterback who doesn't need to be rehabilitated. This is a quarterback who has already won at a pretty high level. This is somebody who won with the Cleveland Browns, people. One of, if not the most dysfunctional franchise in sports. So if you can win a playoff game with the Cleveland Browns, I'm pretty sure you can win anywhere you go as long as you get the necessary pieces that you need to be somewhat successful. And I think that Baker Mayfield has that. And on the defense side of the football, I mean, even if you don't trust Ben McAdoo, if you're a Panthers fan, you most definitely should trust Phil Snow. I think that Phil Snow is one of the best up-and-coming defensive minds in the game. This defense at times last year was pretty good. And there was some times when this defense even won some games for the Carolina Panthers that the offense ended up folding and losing because they couldn't get nothing going. So your defensive line, I think, is pretty solid. You got Brian Burns, Derek Brown, Matt Ioannidis, and your two Gross Matu. Linebacker, we're just going to cross our fingers and pray to the football gods that Carolina can get some decent linebacker play. But, I mean, cornerback isn't too bad. Dante Jackson, pretty solid. One of the more solid, consistent corners in the league. Probably a top 25 corner. You got C.J. Henderson, who has some promise, has some potential that still hasn't really been tapped into yet. He was still learning the system last year when he got traded from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Panthers. You got J.C. Horn, who had his season cut short. He could be really good this year. And then you got Jeremy Chinn, who is a hybrid safety who can do it all, one of the best up-and-coming safeties in the league. So you have a pretty young, solid defense. And with Phil Snow at the helm, at defensive coordinator, I think that the Panthers defense is going to be in very good hands this year. So with Baker Mayfield on this team, it dramatically changes things, for me at least. Because before Baker Mayfield got traded to Carolina, I had this team at 5 wins. With him now on the roster, I have Carolina winning 9 games. And going 9-8 this year is good enough to get you at least a 7 seed or maybe better. Because the NFC is not that great. And even though the Carolina Panthers pretty much play in the toughest division in this conference, in my opinion, maybe if you want to include the NFC West, I wouldn't fault you for that. But the NFC South is really competitive now. Because Carolina pretty much is a playoff team, or maybe a borderline playoff team, depending if you're a Panthers fan or not. But you do have the Saints, who have a really talented roster. Also, another team that's going under the radar. And we already know about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As long as Tom Brady's able to stay healthy, they're going to be in the mix. So you have 3 teams in this division who are more than capable of being able to make it into the playoffs. And I'm pretty confident that the Saints and the Buccaneers are going to be there. And I think that the Carolina Panthers can sneak their way into that 7 seed because their schedule, believe it or not, is pretty manageable. You play Cleveland, Baker Mayfield's former team. I find that kind of odd. But that's a winnable game if Deshaun Watson, depending on what happens with him, plays or doesn't play. Based off the word on the street, maybe Deshaun Watson doesn't get suspended at all. Then you play the New York Giants, pretty winnable. You got the Saints, but you play them twice. You play Arizona, San Francisco. I think that there's a good chance you could split one of those 2 games. Then you have to play the Rams, the Buccaneers. That's probably going to be a tough stretch for you. You might not be able to win neither of those 2 games. But you do play Atlanta, which I think that Atlanta probably is going to be competing for the number 1 overall draft pick for 2023 and that year's draft. So I don't think Atlanta's going to be all that great this year. You probably should be able to beat Atlanta both times. At worst, you split with them. You got Cincinnati. You got Baltimore, Denver before you play your bye or before you have your bye. So that's going to be 2 of your toughest games before then. And then after your bye week, things are pretty easy for you. And on top of that, you have it really late into the season, which is when you want your bye week. So after your bye week, you're playing Seattle, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Tampa, and New Orleans. And I do think that you should be able to take care of Seattle. Pittsburgh could be a game that could go either way, but you like your chances there because you are playing them at home. And then you have Detroit, Tampa, New Orleans to close off the season. Those last 2 games are going to be both on the road. So for Carolina, I think that 9 wins should be more than achievable for the talent that they currently have. I don't think that the NFC is that great. So 9-8 is good enough to get you the 7 seed, maybe the 6 seed. So I think that Carolina is a playoff team, and I think they are going to make it into the playoffs this year. And as I mentioned earlier, year 3 has always been that peak year for Matt Rule everywhere he's been. So I'm assuming that year 3 is going to be the year that he has things figured out in Carolina. A lot of Carolina Panthers fans have been, I wouldn't say extremely patient, but, they've been willing to wait. They understood that, 2020, year 1 under Matt Rule, wasn't going to be a year that they were going to contend for anything meaningful. 2021, you were expecting a little bit of improvement. Playoffs might not have been your expectations, but you were expecting to at least be able to be in the playoff race for at least the majority of the year until the final closing weeks of the season. And you weren't able to do that. You pretty much took some steps back. But this year, I think that Carolina is good enough to get one of those 2 playoff spots in the NFC when it comes to the 6th or the 7th seed. So let me know how you guys are feeling about the Carolina Panthers going into the upcoming 2022 NFL season. Do you guys think that Carolina will make it into the postseason this year?